And we've got one final fireside chat, which I'm about to invite my speaker up to. A quick reminder for anyone who wants to have a further chat with Tony Juniper, he's going to be doing a book signing in the book corner at 5 o'clock. So you can ask him any questions there and hopefully get a copy of the great book. So, to segue to our final conversation, I'd love to invite Marylin Waite to the stage, and I'll introduce her when she is seated with me. Did you know that these were going to be the colors of the chairs? You're very color coordinated.
Oh, I had no idea, but I am a clairvoyant, so.
Thanks for joining us, Marylin.
That was a great panel, by the way.
It was really good. And we're going to take another turn in our story. Is that mic working?
Can you hear me?
Can everyone hear Marylin? Great. We're going to take another turn in our story for our conversation together. We're going to focus more on where can we redirect capital flows within the existing financial system today. So we will get into that in a minute, but a few words of introduction for Marylin, for those of you who don't know her. Marylin is the Managing Director of the Climate Finance Fund. She's worked across 4 continents in renewable and nuclear energy, climate modeling and investment. She's the author of Sustainability at Work, Careers That Make a Difference. And she has published in multiple publications from the FT, Le Monde, the Boston Globe. She was previously head of the energy practice at Village Capital and has also worked with Project Drawdown. So names that have shown her wide-ranging research expertise in the field. So Marylin, now to the questions. You've spent your career aligning financial systems, trying to align the financial system with justice and equity. What does that look like in practice when you're trying to reshape capital flows in your world?
Thank you, Ella. So the first thing, no matter where you are in the world, is to ask the who. Who is being overlooked? Who is being left out? Who is not at the table? Having this Jedi lens, so a lens of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, starts first and foremost with that. Who is missing? What am I missing? It's a humbling posture. And then it's actively bringing that intention into the work to make sure that those voices are not only included, but are centered.
Yeah.
There are 3 concrete things that I want to mention along with this Jedi lens, this lens of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. The first is supporting local financial institutions. So that's local banks and credit unions that understand that who and that can best respond to that. The second would be financing in local currencies, creating a virtuous cycle of investment where the profits and proceeds can then go into investing again in that local currency, thus reducing all kinds of cross-border risks. And finally, investing in local capital markets, which we'll get into in a second, I believe.
Great. And I think it's a great follow-on from the more meta conversation we've just had to think about what are the practical steps that people in this audience, the community of investors, startups, entrepreneurs, and corporates who are looking at ways to bring justice more deeply into their investments and into their approaches. So maybe we'll start with one part of the system, the banking system, which I know is a particular area of passion for you. What are some of the tangible ways in which we can influence the capital flows of banks today? And what are some of the banks that you feel are putting their money where their mouth is in terms of supporting a just transition?
Right, so over 90% of capital globally is in the form of bank debt, so it's hugely important. For every €1, 1 renminbi, whatever the currency is in that bank account, it is leveraged, right? So it's leveraged by 5 times, 10 times, 15 times, even more, depending on where you are in the world. And so it's very consequential. Even for small amounts, that bank is then on lending for either harm or positive impact. It really is as simple as that. So one, at the individual household level or at the business level, can ask their bank a number of critical questions. But if you're short for time, there are some shortcuts. Looking for labels like B Corp, B Corp financial institutions, especially now that those standards have been made more vigorous and rigorous. Looking if they're members of GABV, the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. Looking to see if that bank or credit union has any kind of mission designation. So that can be a beyond for-profit framework, for example. What are their exclusions? Have they excluded financing fossil fuel expansion, for example? These are all the ways that we can align our banking with this positive impact, especially climate action and just action.
Amazing. A checklist of questions for you to all ask your banks if you haven't already. One thing I know that you work a lot on is how do we democratize access to climate wealth. So a lot of the upside of the climate investment boom is landing in the pockets of those who already have a significant amount of wealth and capital. If we're thinking about the public markets and listed equities, are there in-routes for people who might not already have a significant stack of capital to benefit from that climate wealth that will continue to be built over the years to come?
I really like this question. First, for the context, there's this dichotomy at play in the international, let's say, climate action movement. When we talk about mitigation, we talk about the global north. And when we talk about adaptation, we talk about the global south. Well, the truth is that the trillions that are being mobilized and that will be mobilized are building wealth for mitigation. Those solar panels, those wind turbines. My shoes happen to be made in Kenya. They're Endas, but most of this manufacturing is not happening on the African continent. They're carbon neutral shoes that I'm wearing. All of that is creating wealth. And all of that is an opportunity. There's also a bit of confusion, I would say, out there around the impact of the public markets and listed equity in particular. Well, what's the impact if I'm buying a stock for a company from someone else? So what is that? How does that make a difference? Well, there are two very important things to recognize about the public markets, especially listed equity. The first is that it democratizes wealth. Those companies that are listed are either providing the dividends, so helping create that wealth, or through appreciation also supporting wealth creation. And there are climate solution stocks globally. You can buy a stock right now on the Jamaican Stock Exchange, Wigton Energy for wind farms, Alpha, Namibia, solar, renewable energy developer in Namibia, geothermal company in Indonesia. I mean, all of these are concrete solutions that are building climate wealth. And so by being listed, you have access at the individual level, at the community level, in a way that you do not for private wealth. The second thing is that finance is an ecosystem. So in order to actually back earlier stage innovative ideas, innovative solutions on climate action, you actually do need to have those investors have some sort of exit. Two primary exits are available. One is through the acquisition of that company, and the other is through the public markets. So you actually need those public markets to work for climate action in order to have the earlier stage investments. And so listed equity is hugely important to our goals of having a JEDI lens, just equitable, diverse, and inclusive future.
You mentioned a few companies that are available to invest in public equities. Where would you recommend people look for resources or tools to be able to find some of those examples themselves?
So there is a publicly available open access free of charge database that we have backed. Carbon Collective put it together. It is called climatesolutionsstocks.com. That's climatesolutionsstocks.com. And you can find it by EU, AU, CELAC, so Caribbean, Latin America, ASEAN, et cetera, all parts of the world. You can find those climate solutions that are available according to various sectors and so on, and according to various filters.
Great. I see lots of people on their phones. I hope they are looking up that web link as we speak. And if we look at more of the world of the funds, and I'd love to hear about some of the experience you've had at the Climate Finance Fund, and I'm sure it comes on from your experience working in funds in the past. But there are a series of new funding models, I guess, that integrate justice at the core of those how those funds are set up and therefore where the money flows. Can you share some examples of how some of those funds would be constructed, and maybe if you want to share what some of those funds are called? I know there's a great ecosystem building here in Paris and actually in Europe, showcasing the way for how we can restructure some of those private equity funds.
Sure, so I'll give you two examples from our portfolio. We've backed the ENAR Foundation's Climate and Racial Justice Fund. So ENAR stands for the European Network Against Racism. And their fund is investing in climate SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, from Europe's racialized communities, from communities with migrant backgrounds or immigrant populations, and other overlooked parts of the European ecosystem. And that's quite innovative because, again, these trillions of euros being mobilized, that's creating wealth, and if we don't have intentionality around that, it can create more inequalities, right, and inequities. The second example, there is a fund here in Paris called 2050 that has almost like a perpetual trust model, similar to Patagonia.
Will you just talk through what a perpetual trust model is?
Well, essentially, it's kind of the purpose of the entity, whether it's an investment fund or a non-financial company, is some kind of greater good, is to serve positive social and environmental impact. And so almost like a foundation owning the company or owning the for-profit structure. And so in this hybrid, and for 2050, this kind of hybrid structure not only supports individual climate action in terms of climate solutions companies, startups, but also systemic change in the financial system, especially the venture capital ecosystem, which can be quite extractive. Sometimes it's known as vulture capital, right? And so they take some of the proceeds from that structure and support actors that will actually drive systemic change, so that the rules of the game actually are more in favor of positive social and environmental impact.
And are they investing across a range of different sectors?
Yeah, so every now and again, they will change their specific theme. They had a previous specific theme on, for example, deep decarbonization with carbon removal, and now they've moved to more blue economy ideas and actions related to the ocean, for example, so that they will shift their theme within the broader theme of climate.
I mean, it's great to see the number of funds like that are growing in the ranks. Obviously, when we look at the dollar signs behind them, they are not at the level that we need them. What would it take, thinking about Joshua's point of engaging with the BlackRock CEO, what's it going to take to bring some of the intentionality and impact of a fund like 2050 up to those enormous financial institutions? It's a big question, but I'll let you have a go.
Well, funny enough, we did a fund with BlackRock.
Okay.
It's called the Climate Finance Partnership, CFP. It's not the biggest fund in the world. It's had a first close a few years ago at 600 million USD and had a goal of, still has the goal of $1 billion, although now they will have a second fund. And we had to force their hand. We said, listen, we're putting our capital into this fund alongside others, other aligned foundations, peers, and so on. And you must invest in Africa. You have zero footprint in Africa, but for this fund, you must go. These things have to be as a part of your diligence process. There will be an impact committee that will validate each transaction into private equity. And so you have to force it. You have to bring the intentionality and say, listen, this is how it has to be done. Sometimes it's through regulation, sometimes it's through policy making, but also just through the investment policy statement of your investment fund and through your policies at the company level.
And how's that fund going at the moment, if I can ask?
It's too early to say. This is post the One Planet Summit.
Okay.
But it's thriving. Deals are being made. The first deal was actually a wind project in Kenya. There's been acquisitions of solar in the Philippines and so on. So it's going well, but too early to say. You have to ask me when the fund is actually complete and we have the final metrics.
We'll have to have you back on stage to talk about that example, maybe with someone from BlackRock as well. So I'm just going to ask you two final questions. I'm actually going to re-ask the question that I asked Fadel and Joshua, which was, if you could have dinner with one person or group of leaders tonight, and you could influence them in one part of the agenda you've just been describing, who would be that group of leaders or leader, and what would you be asking of them in support of the work you're doing?
So I'll answer, but the answer has multiple layers, so I will cheat.
That's okay.
So it would be any kind of financial regulator that can actually implement incentives, because investors respond to incentives. That can be a tax break. Mostly it can be a tax break, actually. That's the number one incentive. But other ways, it could be a lowering of costs, lowering of tariffs, lowering of what have you. But I would ask whoever, whether it's sometimes it's the Ministry of the Economy, sometimes it's Commerce, sometimes it's any other financial regulator, put in place the incentives that enables your investors, retail and institutional investors, to cross a border to invest in climate solutions and sustainability, ESG-friendly solutions broadly. Right now, that is exactly what's missing. Here in France, for example, lots of incentives to save for retirement. None of it is incentivized to cross a border into the former colonial powers of France.
Yeah. It's a really good structural reform that we need to happen, and linking back to Fadel's comments earlier. So to close, Marylin, thinking of the people in this room, which is a cross-section, as we know, of different change makers globally, what is one thing beyond the list of questions for their bank that we've already done today that you're asking them to go out and do when they leave this conference tomorrow? What is one way that they can contribute to making sure their capital and the capital of the organizations that they work for is flowing into just and equitable solutions?
So check on your own bank, your own retirement savings. Check and see if they are actually aligned with sustainability, with environmental, social, and good governance practices. And open up one new thing, whether it's a new account, savings, bonds, listed equity, that is aligned.
Great. Thank you so much, Marylin.
Thank you,
Great
Ellen.
to have that conversation with you. And with that, we'll close this session. We've gone on a journey through Tony's amazing, rousing introduction, ending with the cause of thrivalism, looking at why a just Earth is needed and why we need to look at social inequalities at the same time as climate. Then we went through Fadel and Joshua's conversation, looking at some of the debt and structural inequalities left over from the colonial system, proposal for how we can get global South countries to band together to redesign and restructure that economic system. And then closing with this great conversation with Marylin, getting slightly more practical and thinking at the certain financial mechanism in the public markets, in the private markets, that you as individuals and investors and startup leaders can take out into the world today. So thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.